Hi everyone, I am Sreekanth. We are discussing programming in C language. The today's topic is about basics of C. We are discussing basics of C programming language. The today's agenda of this session is about developing programs in a C. What are the steps to develop a program in a C program language? The structure of a C program, like syntax, what are the rules and regulations we need to follow for developing a C programming language, that is called structure of a C program, and what are the various parts of simple C program with suitable examples we try to discuss in this session. See, the general steps used to develop the C programming is define the program objective. Step 1 indicates define the program objective. See what this step indicates, we must remember, or we should start with a clear picture or idea of what you want the program to do in the define the program objective. Next, design the program. See, once we got the clarity of the particular problem, we are ready to provide a solution, then we need to represent that solution in the form of what, pseudo code into the design format, pictorial format or graphical format. Once design is clear, then start for writing the code in the set of C instructions. See, once code is ready, after completion of writing the source code, then the someone need to convert these high level instructions into machine understandable instruction. C is a compiler based programming language. Here compiler is a language translator, converts high level instructions to machine understandable instructions, and compiler also checks the syntax and semantics of the code what we written in the source code. If anything went wrong, the compiler is responsible to generate compile time errors. Once compilation is free, then start for executing the program. See, the linker and loader is responsible to load our object file or machine understandable file, and start for providing runtime environment and execution of program. See, then where we are writing this program, where we are writing the source code. See, generally we are writing the source code, basic text editors, and we can attach these compilers and interpreters to the particular DOS environment. Otherwise we go with directly IDE. See, we can write directly these C programs with the help of what, IDE, integrated development environment. See, several IDs are available, like Turbo C++ IDs is there, like NetBeans IDs are there, Eclipse IDs are there, Dev C++ is there, code blocks are there, like several IDs. Use any one of the ID, we can write the program, and there only we can compile, there only we can execute the program. So that is advantage for using what, IDE, integrated development environment. Once execution of the program is done, next we need to test and debug the program whether the program is done correctly or not. After that, maintain and modifying the program. So this is the general steps involved for what, developing the program in a C programming language. Define the program objectives, design the program, write the code, compiling, run the program. If anything went wrong at runtime environment, test and debug the program, maintain and modify the program. What is the structure of C program? The basic structure of C program involves several steps. The first step consists what? Documentation section. See here, this document section involves very vital role for any programming language. This document section consists like a single line comment section, like single line comment and multi-line comments. Represented is what? Slash. Okay, forward slash. Here single line command and multi-line commands helps to increase the readability and understandability of the particular program and its logic. See, this document section helps to improve the readability and understandability of the particular programming language. Okay, so generally in C language we are going to be writing this documentation section consists of what? Comments lines giving the name of the program and program logic, program functionality we can describe in the comment section. For single line, we can write the single line comment with the help of what? Forward slash. In the multi-line comments, we can write more than one line comment section with the forward slash with what? This multiplication symbol, asterisk symbol. Okay. or star symbol we can call it. So next section is called link section. See, the link section provides instructions to the compiler to link functions from the system library. Link section lists files to be included and pre-processed before compiling the program. This includes the provides instructions to the compiler to what? Link functions from the system libraries. This includes files providing instructions to the compiler to link functions from the system library. So these link section consists generally standard libraries of C. See, these standard libraries are represented in the form of what? Header files, like stdio.h, standard input output header file, conio.h, console input output dot header files. See, several C standard header files are there. See, we can include in the particular program based on the requirement of the program. We can include particular header files. These are all called built-in header files. See, in further we can also include customized header files like user-defined header files based on our need of particular program. See, this comes under what? Link section. Next, definition section. See, this definition section defines what? All symbolic constants. This definition section consists what? All symbolical constants. Generally, these definition section is going to be represented using hash or preprocessor define, hash define we can call it, but in C language we may call this a symbol is what? Preprocessor or pre-directive. In both the header files or in case of what? Definition section, the symbol indicates what? Preprocessor or pre-directive. Instead of calling hash symbol, we call it here preprocessor or pre-directive. Next section is called what? Global declaration section. See, in case of definition section, we are going to be define what? Symbolic constant, like hash define the pi value. Pi is what? Constant value, pi value. Or I want to define some boolean value like a true or false, then I can go with what? Hash define, like I can represent boolean value as defined pi, as defined true, as defined false. Like we can represent what? Symbolical constants within the program. Then we can go with definition section. In the definition section we can define symbolical constants. Next, global declaration section. Generally in global declaration section we are defining what? Global variables are declared. See, these global variables that are used in more than one user defined function, such variables are called global variables and are declared in the global declaration section. So generally that is outside of what? All the functions. Here assume these are all called user defined functions. I want to use the same variable for all the different functions, then we go with what? Global declarations, global variables we may call it. So generally these declarations are done outside of the main function. So those are all called global declaration sections, global variables we may call it. Next, function prototype section. I want to write my user defined functions, then I want to declare what function you are going to be writing. Generally we go with what? Function prototype, all user defined functions. Before providing the functionality of the particular function, then we try to declare that function before the main function or outside of the function is called, outside of the main function is called function declaration part or prototype part. Comes under what? Function prototype section. Okay, example, like I try to provide, I want to write my own user defined function like void add function. Simply I'm going to be define or declare outside of the main function or before the main function. So this represents what? Function prototype or function declaration. Okay, see, once this function prototype is going to be declared, later we are going to be providing the functional definitions, where we are going to be calling these function definitions. Generally we are going to be calling these function definitions from what? Function calling with from main functionalities. Okay, so this is about what? The outside of main function consists link section, documentation section, link section, definition section, global variables, and function prototype. See, always remember the execution is always starts from with what? Main function. Main is an entry point for all programming languages. See, from main only the controller is going to be entry and exit, like entry and exit of the particular programming language always uses what? Main function. Main is an entry point for what? All programming languages. Coming to C syntax, main function consists what? this is called function definition. Main function is going to be writing set of statements enclosed with what? Curly braces. Okay, within that two sections are there majorly. The first section is called declaration section, the second section is called execution section. C language, before using any variables must be declared initially. In C language, before utilizing any kind of variables must be declared at the beginning in the main function itself. That part is called declaration part or declaration section. uh, After that, the second section consists what? Execution section. There we may initialize it, we may write the logical part, and we may execute it. After that, we may get what? Resultant output. Generally, this execution section consists what? Complete initialization, logical, and output of the particular programming logic involves in the execution section. So in C language, generally this main function consists two parts. One is called declaration section, another called execution section. Okay, and C is what? Structured programming language. We can divide this main problem into several sub problems with the help of what? Sub program sections or user defined sections or sub routines. The main problem can be divided into sub problems, several functions. With the help of user defined functions, we can provide the functionality separately, and we can solve the each main problem in the form of what? Each sub problems, dividing the main problem into sub problems like problem 1, problem 2, problem 3, so on, problem n. Each problem we can provide the functionality in the C programming language with the help of what? Functions topic, like function 1, function 2, so on, function n. We may declare and provide the definitions n number of functions outside of what? Main function. How to organize these functions, then how to call these functions? Main function is responsible to calling these functions, particular functions, whenever we require. The main advantage for using functions: code reusability, and it improves what? Readability of the program, and it decreases what? Like errors and bugs in the program. Even bugs are rises, easy to identify and trace. We can resolve the bugs very easily with the help of what? Functions topic. So this is the complete syntax of C programming language, but not required to write every time complete all these syntax. Okay, based on the user requirement we can write. If you require document section, so better to maintain a documentation section for what? Better understandability and readability of the particular program name, program logics, and particular logic or part of the program. Better the documentation section should be maintained in the each program. Link section for defining what? Header informations, what type of C libraries we are including in our program and using in our program. Definition section based on the constants, symbolical constants are using in our program, then we try to go with definition section. Global declarations whenever we require the common variable for what? Multiple functionalities, then you go with what? Global declaration. When I want to perform user defined customized functions, user defined functions, then we go with what? This function prototype section, and we can provide functionalities of particular user defined functions. So otherwise directly you can go with what? Main function. Main is enough for writing and executing the C programs, because execution starts and ends with what? Main function. Main functions two things in C programming: declaration section, another called execution section. In declaration section we must declare the variables before using. Must be declare all the variables in the declaration section before utilizing or using that particular variables. After that, execution section complete logic, initialization, logical part, output part comes under what? Execution section. So this is a simple syntax with the clear explanation about what? The complete syntax of what? C programming language. The documentation section generally supports in C programming language in the form of two ways. One is called single line command, another one called multi-line command. Link section, several header files we can able to include in the link section. Definition section, all macros like symbolical constants we can define with what? Definition section. Global variables and function prototypes and main function. Generally this main function consists what? Declaration part, initialization part, logical part, output part, but basically it categorizes two parts. One is declaration section, another called execution section. Here beside of main function void is there. Some syntaxes they used int. Remember, by default return type in C, the main function is what? Void. Okay, if you return void is fine. you want to declare explicitly return type, then you go with what? Particular return type called int type. But by default return type in C language is what? Void type. You can write void main function. Always this functionality enclosed with what? Open and closed braces. If you want to provide in future several user defined function definitions, the outside of the main function, next to the main function, generally we provide what? Functionalities of what? User defined functions. So this is the syntax of what? C program. And don't worry, in the next coming slides we'll discuss in detail with the example programs. We may understood very clearly about the based on the syntax of C program. Generally, the parts of C program involves what? Several sections like documentation sections, like comment section, generally represented by what? Single line and multi-line comments. The main advantage for using these comments are not acquired any kind of memories, and compiler interpreters are not going to be execute these comment or documentation section. Just it is used for what? User understandability, and it improves what? Readability of the program. This section consists of a set of comment lines giving the name of the program which the programmers would like to use. Okay, and what type of logic is going to be implemented, but it won't allocate any kind of explicit memories, and it won't execute it by compiler and interpreters. Okay, next, link section. Link section consists what? Header information. So in C language, these header files are provided in built standard C standard libraries. Several header files are provided here. Most useful header file is what? stdio.h, standard input output header files. And definition sections consists what? All symbolical constants are represented by what? Definition sections. Generally the constants are defined in these macros, hash define. Global declaration sections, the common variables we must use for different user defined functions or in the main functions. That time we go with what? Several functionalities. Then if we go with what? Global declarations. And main function, main is an entry point for all programming language. C also consists main function enclosed. It consists of statements enclosed with what? Braces, curly braces. Yeah, it consists majorly two parts. One is declaration part, another called execution part. In C language, before executing or utilizing particular variable must be declared initially, initial part of the main function. That part is called declaration part. Main function consists default return type is called void. If you are declaring any integral types, then you can return explicitly using a keyword, return keyword. These subprogram sections means C is a structured programming language. The main program is going to be divided into several subprograms in the C language that can achieve through what? Subroutines or functions. Functions topic. The simple example I provided here, for several user defined functions we can write add function, subtraction function, multiplication function, division function, palindrome functions, factorial functions. Like we may define several user defined functions. Okay, in detail we try to discuss in the example of what? Particular C programming. We try to discuss one by one. Comment section or documentation section. This comment is a programmer readable explanation or annotations in the source code of a computer program. They are added with the purpose of making the source code easier for humans to understand and are generally ignored by compilers and interpreters. The syntax of comments in various programming language varies considerably. Use it to provide information about lines of code. It is widely used for what? Documenting code. Use are commonly part of programming style guides. It helps a developer explain logic of the code and improves what? Program understandability and readability. C supports two different types of commands. One is called single line commands. Single line commands are represented by what? Double slash. Okay, this is the representation of what? Single line command. Multi-line commands. Multi-line commands are represented by what? Slash asterisk symbol. So this is the representation of what? Multi-line commands or block line commands or prologue commands. These are all the various names to represent what? Multi-line commands. Generally used for commands for improving what? Understandability and readability of the particular program. Include, see in the link section we are using several header files, right? With the help of what? Include. See, include is a keyword in a C programming. Include is a reserved word. Include files are called copy books or header files. Computer files have a directive often called include. Include means sometimes copy or import. In high level, like especially you go with Java, they are using a keyword called import keyword, but in C, C++ we are using include keyword, including the built-in standard libraries in our programming that causes the contents of a second file to be inserted into what? Main file or original file. The include directory allows what? Libraries of code to be developed. Hash include, I told you this symbol indicates what? Preprocessor directive. Causes the compiler to replace that line with the entire text of the contents of the named source file if included in a quotes. Okay, named header file if included in what? Angle brackets. This is represents what? Angle brackets. These standard headers have identifiers in the form of file name with a extension what? Dot h. C consists generally, commonly we are using two extensions. One is dot c. We are explicitly saving the file name with what? Dot c. It means the C program code or source code. But dot h indicates what? Header information. Inbuilt some functionalities are added into one file. That file is called dot h file, header informations. Simply we can call it as a library files. Examples like hash include stdio.h, hash include conio.h, and so on. Several header files supported by C language. Hash include directive can determine which header or source file to include in an implementation definition way. C standard libraries. The C standard libraries is the standard library of the C programming language as specified in the ISO C standard. Since ANSI C version was adopted by the ISO International Organization for Standardization, the C standard library is also called the ISO C library. The C standard library provides what? Macros, type definitions, and functions for tasks such as string handling, mathematical computations, input output processing, memory management, and several other operating system services. API, generally we may call in the next level programming languages using a terminology is called what? API, application programming interface. See, here we may call it what? Header files. The API of the C standard library declared in a number of header files. Each header file contains one or more function declarations, data type definitions, and macros. Some inbuilt functionalities are enclosed in one file called .h file. We may call it as header files. It comes under what? API, application programming interface. So whenever we required, we can include that header file. We can utilize that inbuilt functionalities. Instead of writing entire code, we can include that header file. We can utilize that functionality from that header file. Best examples like assert.h, conio.h, ctype.h, stdio.h, float.h, math.h, like several built-in standard libraries provided in the form of what? .h files, header files. Okay. Here, most commonly used header files in the C programming like stdio.h. Stdio stands for what? Std stands standard. I stands for input. O stands for what? Output. It represents what? Standard input output header file. See, input. I stands for input. O stands for what? Output. Std stands for what? Standard input output header file. The name clearly indicates what? It is a standard input output header file. It consists several input functions, output functions are there, and also it consists several built-in functionalities are well defined in built. The C programming language provides many standard library functions for the file input and output. These functions make up the bulk of the C standard libraries header stdio.h. So it consists most familiar input output functions like formatted and unformatted input output functions, but at present we try to discuss formatted input output functions. Most useful input function is called scanf function. Scanf is a formatted input function in C language. It represented what? Scanf function. So this open and closed parenthesis indicates what? Function is used for what? Input. It reads the input data from the console. Scanf, it consists syntax like format string enclosed with double quotes and comma list of argumented list, input variables list. Okay, generally it going to be represented with the ampersand symbol, indicates what? Address of the particular variable. Okay, here format string in C language, we must define it what type of input we are using. Like integral type represented by percentile D. Format string, character type, I'm reading characters, then you must define one format string called percentile C. I'm using string type, then the format string specifies percentile S represents what? String type, where I want to read string data, like I want to read float data, then why must declare format string as percentile F. Like several format strings are there, we try to discuss in detail in the next coming sessions. These format string once we use, then the C understood okay, user want to read integral type when we define percentile D. If you define percentile C as a format string, then C understood okay, user want to read one character or single character. If you define percentile S, yes, C understood okay, user or programmer want to read what? Group of characters that represented by what? Percentile S string type, like that. Another important formatted output function is called printf function. Printf is a formatted output function in the C programming. This function generally is used for what? Producing output to the console. It prints the given statement to the console. The general syntax of printf function is printf. We can directly enclose the output messages with the help of what? Double quotes. Okay, we can also use some format strings. We can print format string and list of output variables like printf. You can directly print output messages, format specifiers, some escape sequences within the double quotes. Okay, here not required about ampersand. Directly we can what? Define what? List of variables only, output variables, not required to use any ampersand here. Just declare what? List of output variables only. For input we must define what? Ampersand symbol. For output not required to define any ampersand symbol, directly using list of output variables. So this is about what? stdio.h header files, standard input output header files. Okay, see, the standard input output header file, say in case of printf function not required to give any kind of list of output variables. Okay, with the help of ampersand symbol, directly you can write printf output equals to format specifiers, okay, and variables. Specific in output variable, you can display which variable you want to print, that variable. So this is very most commonly useful input output function. The C programming language is scanf function, another called printf function. Next, conio.h header file, console input output header file, is a C header file used mostly by what? MS-DOS compilers to provide what? Console input output. These header declares several useful library functions for performing iStream input and OStream output from a program. Most C compilers that targets DOS, Windows 3, like DOS X or Windows 32 have this header and supplies associated library functions in the default C library. So when we are working with the console based IDEs or editors, that time we need to use what? conio.h header file. See, we need to use this conio.h for clearing the screen. I want to get the char entry from the console. Okay, several member functions it includes, but most commonly used the member functions of the conio.h like kb hit determines if a keyboard key was pressed, c getters reads a string directly from the console, c scanf function reads the formatted value directly from the console, put ch writes a character directly to the console, c puts writes a string directly to the console, c printf formats value and writes them directly to the console, clr scr clears the screen. So we generally use this clr scr function for what? When we are working with the console editors to clear the output screen, then we use what? clr scr function. Get ch function, get char entry from the console, get ch, it reads character from keyboard and echoes to output to screen. Text color, this function is used to change the text color. Okay, I want to change the text color in the output, then we go with what? Text color function. Text background, this function is used to change the text background. We can print the different text colors and text backgrounds using these functions, text color and text background functions. These several functions are there here. Most useful functions I wrote here, and clr scr and get ch is very commonly used when we are working the console editors. That time this conio.h is going to be very useful. Next, main function. So an implementation of C provides all of the standard library function is called a hosted implementation. Programs written for hosted implementation are required to define a special function is called main function. Main function is an entry and exit point for what? All programming languages. Most of the high level programming languages, the main function coming to C language is also, it is an entry and exit. The flow of what? Execution, declaration, execution, everything is started and it ended with what? Within a main function only. The general syntax of function like return type, name of the function, and list of parameters like parameter list. And it consists what? The list of statements are enclosed with what? Curly braces. Generally it consists what? Statements. If you are using any explicit return type like integral type, float type, like a string type, character array type, then you must use what? Return keyword. Okay, we'll discuss in the user defined functions in detail about this syntax. Now here remember, we can define the main function or declare the main function in different ways, like int main function. When you are using int main function, you must write here what? Return keyword. When you are using void main function, not required to use any return keyword. Void is an empty type, it does not return any value to the main memory. Okay, see, this is a different here. Int main, it consists list of parameter list, right? This is generally used for what? Command line arguments. We try to discuss each different way of representing main functions when we are working in the C program applications. Okay, so generally we use these two syntax like void main functions or int main functions. When using int main functions, we must write what? Return keyword within the functionality between open and closed curly braces. Okay. Next, what are the process of creating, compiling, and executing the C programs? Generally, these 4 steps involves we are writing the source code like high level instruction with the help of C syntax. Once source code is ready, the compiler is a language translator. It checks the syntax and semantics of the C program, whether programmer is followed correct syntax semantics or not. If anything went wrong, the compiler is responsible to generate compile time errors. Okay, once compilation error is free, the compiler converts high level instructions into what? Machine understandable instruction. See, that is the job of what? Compilation. See, different types of shortcuts are enabled by what? Based on the IDE, what we are going to be using. Okay, like console IDs have different and Windows IDs have different way of providing shortcuts for what? Compilation and executing and runtime execution files. Well, generally we go with for control F9 for most of the IDEs for console based applications. Next step, execution or running the executable file. If you want to check the result explicitly in consoles, then we go with check result shortcut is what? Alt plus F5. So in this session, we had discussed in detail about how to develop a basic C program, what are the steps involved to develop a C programming, and also we discussed structure of a C program, what are the syntax involved into the C program, and also we discussed some different parts of the C program like what is documentation section, and also we discussed in detail link section, and most of the header files are there in link section, but I discussed here the most commonly used header files like stdio.h and another one called conio.h for what? Console IDs. There we are using conio.h header file. After that, we also discussed what? Like a definition section, generally for representing symbolical constants, and global declarations and function prototype sections and main function. The main function consists what? Without return type called void, with return type called integral. But main in C language, main function by default return type is what? Empty return type, void. And these statements are enclosed in the main function. Set of statements are enclosed in the main function with the help of what? Open and closed flower braces. Okay, next, within the main function, majorly it consists two things: declaration part, another called execution part. In C language, before executing or before utilizing any kind of variables must to be declared at the beginning section only, that is called declaration section. After that, in the execution part consists again initialization part, logical part, and output part. Okay, and we can also write, if you required any user defined functionalities, we may write next after main function, outside of the main function, we may write the different user defined functionalities. Means the main intention for writing functions in C programming, code reusability and easy to debug, and divide main problems into what? Several sub problems. Okay, so this is about the today's session. Okay, thank you for watching my videos. Thank you all.